Kia ora, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure this evening to take a call as the Opposition's Transport spokesperson on the Land Transport Drug Driving Amendment Bill. This is a piece of legislation, sir, that Labor supported at first reading, was very constructive, I believe, through the Select Committee process, supported at second reading. We did have some issues that we still don't think are resolved that weren't resolved at the committee stage, but despite that, we come to third reading, and as a party, we will be supporting this bill this evening. It's interesting, Mr Speaker, just listening to the Minister outline the government's belief that this will prioritise road safety. It's interesting, sir, because at the same time, of course, this is a government that is not responding to the needs of communities when it comes to road safety in relation to lower speed limits in communities where they have called specifically for that. So it is interesting to hear that from the Minister, but I do hope that the rationale, which is one based on road safety, is one that is one to be enjoyed by the House this evening. When we step back, Mr Speaker, and have a look at the impact of drugs in the systems of drivers of motor vehicles in New Zealand, it's very clear that the data and the statistics indicate that a significant proportion of serious injuries, and need I say fatalities, are easily attributable to that particular criteria as well. And so that's why when Labor was in government, we sought to introduce roadside testing. We had a very clear view that procurement should not be what drives this legislation, and it's something that has been expressed, I think, at all stages, actually, and did become perhaps more apparent through the Select Committee process that this is a piece of legislation that I still believe should not be driven by decisions around procurement, but should be taken from a principled approach as to how things would be rolled out and what is the right thing to do. And that is why, Mr Speaker, up to this point, Labor has been deeply concerned about the concerns that have been expressed right throughout by the Attorney-General around the potential breaches that an individual who might be going about their normal business any day of the week, any time of the week, would be effectively detained at the roadside. And this is something that we were hopeful that the government, during the committee stage, would not only turn their mind to, but would actually give some serious consideration to making some changes. It's something that was contained in the Select Committee report by all members. And the reason, sir, as to why there was no specified change in the Select Committee report is because we were not in a position, given time, to land ourselves on what an appropriate time limit would be, nor were officials able to provide the committee with what an appropriate level of time might be. For the benefit of folks perhaps at home, what we're talking about here is if someone is going about their business on any day of the week and they come across a random checkpoint, a police checkpoint, as they will experience when it comes to alcohol breath screening tests at the moment, and it is for the purpose of a drug test under this legislation, it is possible that they could be detained at the roadside for any length of time. Because the bill as currently drafted has no limitations on how long someone could be detained. It's something that the Attorney-General herself did raise. There is only one other piece of legislation in this country when it comes to land transport where there is a time limit, and that's 15 minutes for the police to effectively detain someone for the purposes of establishing their identity. So there is precedent for this in legislation, and so it is disappointing that the government and the Minister didn't actually follow through on that. I am hopeful, though, that given there is a review period, and the review must be commenced within a 5-year period, I am hopeful that the government would look at the implementation of this bill and turn their mind to sort of time considerations to address the specific concerns that the Attorney-General had raised. And I want to just really stress, sir, that these were concerns that were brought to the committee's attention and brought to parliamentarians' attention by the Attorney-General. And the concerns that Labor has had and expressed through this process have been a direct result of the concerns that she has raised. So it is disappointing that we have landed there. Mr Speaker, there are some really interesting changes that have come through as a result of this in front of the Select Committee. And one of the things that didn't change is the nature of the consultation that the Minister of Police, who would be the person who needed to be satisfied that these would be devices that could basically detect a list of qualifying or families of qualifying drugs. The change in the legislation is that the Minister no longer has to be satisfied that the threshold would be met at a level that there was impairment to be followed through. That is an extremely high threshold in terms of the nature of the devices being approved for that purpose. So we would have liked to have seen the opportunity for the Minister of Police in this circumstance to be able to consult with others outside the Minister of Transport and the Minister of Science, if that was the case indeed. One of the interesting things that this bill does also provide is it provides a pathway for the police to engage the compulsory impairment tests. The Select Committee heard from the police that there is an undertaking to sort of roll out the numbers of trained individuals that would be able to administer these tests. If we're in rural communities where it might take some time to get a trained CIT person to the particular site, that does cause some limitations in itself. So it is pleasing to see that there is going to be a pathway that's available to the police there. I have no doubt that, you know, the police are well intentioned in this space. Actually, I spent Saturday night out with my local Palmerston North Police and they do a fantastic job. But there is a concern that, you know, there needs to be limits that are baked into this legislation that provide certainty around liberty and the ability for folk who are just going about their normal business of the day or night to be able to do that. It's really interesting that the ability for someone to elect for an independent analysis at the lab was something that was a new addition. And I want to thank submitters for identifying that and for the committee for bringing that in, because as it stood, as originally drafted, there wouldn't have been that ability for someone who might have an issue with the laboratory process to independently seek, at their own cost, the ability to have their sample tested. And then, of course, it needs to be by a verified and authenticated laboratory. But provided that that was followed through, then that was another safeguard within the legislation. One of the interesting things that we've heard from the government is that they intend to roll this out by Christmas. I hope that this is a procedure and a bill that's really implemented in communities in a way that's safe. That procurement is something that still needs to be worked through. And again, I really don't like the sense that procurement is what drives legislation. We should be looking at what good legislation is and then procurement falling within that. But I do hope that the government have indicated they want to roll this out by Christmas. That's not a very long runway. I hope that there is a lot of confidence in being able to do that. But I also hope that whilst this is being rolled out in communities all around the country, that there is also an ability to be able to collect the information for the review process that will follow. Because one of the changes that we have seen with this bill is the review would have undertaken quite an explicit list of aspects. For example, the impact that this legislation may have on Māori and Pacific communities, which is something that submitters did raise. That was taken out by the Minister's amendments. So I do hope that the review is able to be undertaken in a way that really does address and turn its mind to some of the real issues that were raised at Select Committee that haven't been worked through in a fulsome way, in my view, by the Committee of the whole House. So, Mr Speaker, as I say, this is a bill that will be important, because road safety is absolutely important. And as I've said, sir, that is the reason why Labour and Government sought to do something about this. This legislation passing, if not tonight then tomorrow, will be a further step towards ensuring that roads are safe and that communities are protected. I commend this bill to the House.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know why Labour is supporting this bill, because the Law Society has made it very clear that this bill should not proceed because it has inconsistencies with Section 21, 22 and 25C of the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. I mean, that for me is an instant disqualifier. If you're doing things that are inconsistent with the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. And I am concerned about the number of Māori that are going to get caught up in this legislation, especially those from the Waikato region, because that's where a lot of people who have had fatalities with drug driving are getting caught.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting there. It's good that Tangi actually brought up a question that Firebeard brought up earlier about you could challenge your results for an independent test,
Yep.
but you have to do it at your own cost. It's just what happens if that test ends up giving a different result. I wonder who bears the cost of that, because in a court, does that mean if you're drug driving, does that mean, do you have the chance of losing your license for a prolonged period of time? Because that's something that, this talks about roadside safety, but it doesn't talk about, I've not heard anything about punishments such as potential license suspensions other than the 12-hour stand-down period, which the police can issue, but it doesn't talk about whether you would sit down there and actually have whether you could potentially lose your license for 6, 12 months, couple of years, that sort of thing there. So maybe we might hear more from the speeches that come up as we go through there. Does it mention anything on the regulatory impact statement about punishments like license suspensions?
I'd have to double check that, but I do know that drivers who refuse to take a screening test will be faced with an infringement fee and demerit points at roadside, and will be prohibited for driving for 12 hours.
Okay, yeah.
Apparently my mic's popping in and out.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but yeah.
It could be just because I keep taking my face away from the mic.
Yeah,
Let's see how we
probably
go.
what it is. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok. Who's got the order, baby?